Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Barrett Louie, part of the team at RiskIQ. We're excited you were able to join us for today's H-ISAC member exclusive workshop with CrowdStrike. Today, we'll be exploring methodologies for threat analysis, walking through use cases, and work through hands-on exercises. Before we get started, there are a couple housekeeping notes. First, today's workshop is being recorded. Second, today's session will be interactive. Throughout the workshop, we'll be unmuting lines for questions and conversation. If you have a question while your line is muted, please send them through the questions window in the GoToWebinar control panel. The team will answer as many as we can as we go. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to also thank the H-ISAC team for being such great partners and being open to bringing you today's content. It's a valued relationship for us, and we appreciate everything, the partnership with Errol and John Crossan and the team. So thanks, guys, for partnering with us on today's workshop. Now, let me introduce you to the team that's here to support you today. First, Benjamin Powell. Benjamin is RiskIQ's Director of Technical Marketing and will be leading today's workshop with Brendan Kermian, who is a sales engineer at CrowdStrike. In addition, we have a few folks that are from the RiskIQ and CrowdStrike teams that will be answering the questions that you submit in the panel. And with that, I'll hand it over to Benjamin.
Hi everyone. Hey, for the H-ISAC leadership, if you'd like to say something to the group before we begin, just Slack Barrett. I'll pause what we're going to do, and you can say hi to everybody and talk to them for a minute. We'll unmute your mic. So please reach out to in the chat so we know if you want to speak, and we'll unmute your mic and you can say hi to everybody. But I want to thank Brendan for coming today. And what we're going to do today is we're going to go over some use cases, but then we're going to show some really interesting integrated use cases between RiskIQ and CrowdStrike. So we're going to look at from starting from known good infrastructure, finding bad stuff, taking that information back to CrowdStrike, or even from an alert in CrowdStrike and taking that information to RiskIQ to expand an investigation and take it back to find new detections. So we want this to be interactive. So please, if you have a question, go to the question section of the chat section, type it in. If it's a great question, we're going to pause. We're going to unmute your mic if you like. You can ask the question. We'll go through, answer it. If there's any follow-up questions, we'll take care of it. But we really want to make sure that you really understand what we're doing. And this is live. We're doing this with real data. CrowdStrike has some samples that they have in their instance that we're going to go through that we're going to analyze, and then we're going to expand it. So it should be a really cool workshop for us, but it gets even better when there's real questions. So this is not staged. The things that we're going to be looking at inside of the systems are live sites, and they are bad. So please don't go there directly. So we want to make sure that you understand that you want to use tools or techniques that can go out and grab the data safely and have that buffer between you and the threat actor. So within RiskIQ, if you're searching for something inside of RiskIQ, we've already gathered that data. So we're not going to go directly to any of these places because you could potentially get compromised, and we don't want that to happen. So just bear in mind, be careful, don't just click on it, copy something if you're going to paste it in, so you're not going to go to the active site. So some of these aren't defanged, so it's very important that you practice social distancing, for example, on these domains and IP addresses. So with that, Brendan, do you want to say hi real quick, and then we'll start?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Benjamin. Hi, everybody. My name is Brendan. I work for CrowdStrike. I'm a sales engineer up in the Pacific Northwest, and I cover both the public sector and healthcare customers up here. So I'm pretty familiar with H-ISAC, and definitely it's you know, a thing that's come up with a lot of different customers. So I look forward to working with you guys today and showing you how some of the PowerShell work that I've done can really you know, help connect the RiskIQ and the CrowdStrike platforms, and even H-ISAC data.
Great. Great. So with that, we'll begin. So one thing I want to explain to everybody is we're going to give out a promo code. And this promo code is going to allow you to have an enterprise trial for 7 days. So if you've already had a trial with RiskIQ, you were in a 30-day trial and that probably ended. If you're new to RiskIQ and you sign up and you use a corporate email account, we call that a security professional because you're kind of vetted. It's not just making a fake email account and getting into the system. And with that, we give you access to services. So if you search an IP address, we're going to tell you what banners and ports that are open on that particular IP address. So we give that to you as a benefit of using your organizational email address. Now, some things might look different than when I search for something than when you search for something, because I might have some things turned on. And when we get into adding the promo code into the system, I will show you what I have enabled and how I did it. So then you can make those adjustments if you liked. So now, when you search for something, if you're using a free email account, you might run out of queries if you don't put the promo code in. So it's really important to add the promo code into the system, so then you will have basically full access, unlimited queries that you can run for 7 days. Now, we're going to try to reach out to you. So if you'd like to extend your trial or see about purchasing the enterprise features in the future, we'll contact you. But it's really important that if you move off of the free email addresses to a corporate one, we're going to give you 90 days of history when you do a query instead of 14 days. So we'll expand your investigation and give you an extra data set. If you haven't registered for RiskIQ, you can go out to community.riskiq.com/registration, and we named the promo code VR for virtual, THW for threat hunting workshop -H-ISAC. It's case sensitive, it's all lowercase. Every single slide that we have today, the promo code is visible. If you have any problems or questions, you can reach out to us in the chat and we can work with you and get things working. If your audio or video has a problem, the best thing to do is to leave the webinar and come back in, and that generally fixes it, okay? So now, if you're gonna add this promo code into the system, once you've logged into RiskIQ, in the upper right-hand corner, if you didn't add it during the registration process, you can add it under account settings. And under account settings, under the profile, there's a promo code section. And in this area, you can click on the little pencil, add the promo code, and then click out of there, and it automatically will boost your queries. Now, another section that's inside there that I want to bring attention to is when you sign up, we will sometimes send you email notifications on like a new article that came out, or if you have a project where we're doing some monitoring for you, any changes that occur in there. So please be aware of this, that you can change your email notifications and frequency and articles that you can make available in there, okay? So inside of the platform today, we're going to give you, we're going to be using several different tools, not just RiskIQ tools. So one of them is PassiveTotal. We're going to also be using Google Safe Browsing, URL Scan IO, hybrid analysis, and I might even show some Maltego maps for you. Now, I'll give you a little background on myself. I'm the Director of Technical Marketing here at RiskIQ. My background, I ran security teams and network teams in the private sector, and then went over and started working for security organizations in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, making security products. Now, one fun fact is I spearfish. In my background, you can see my spear guns there. Sorry about that, my neighbor is moving some trash cans and my dogs are going nuts right now. Sorry about that. Fun fact is, when I tell people I'm into spearfishing, they no longer take my emails, but I actually go out in the ocean and catch fish. This is the last fish I caught about 2 or 3 weeks ago off of La Jolla in San Diego. So Brendan, would you like to talk about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been a sales engineer now for about 6 years or so, although I do have about 12 years in the IT industry working in various support roles, doing things like networking and endpoint security. I have done a lot of work in PowerShell, and that includes the development of a couple different modules that we'll be talking about today. One of them is actually really relevant to the H-ISAC team because it enables you to get that H-ISAC threat feed data really easily. My fun fact, I often get questioned on how old I am. It's a little bit less prevalent now that I'm losing some of the hair, but I've been, in technology for a lot longer than 12 years, starting off running my own bulletin board on a 14.4.
Awesome, thanks. So today what we're going to do, and what was really funny was this is now the second time Brendan and I are doing one of these workshops. When we had this integration that we built to take CrowdStrike data and bring it into the PassiveTotal interface to find out if I search for something, an indicator, if anybody in my organization went there and if there was any threat intelligence from CrowdStrike that I can look at that in PT and understand if there's anything I didn't know about or somebody that accessed something that they shouldn't have. I could see that in one interface. And I was talking with Brendan and I go, it would be really cool that when we expand an investigation, I want to take that information and bring it back into CrowdStrike to find new IOCs and detections. And Brendan goes, well, I can do that in PowerShell, no problem. And so he built these really cool scripts. And so we're going to be demonstrating these scripts. And these scripts are available online to give you that 360-degree view. So if we found something in CrowdStrike, we can go into PassiveTotal, find new things, and bring it back into CrowdStrike. Or I can go into PassiveTotal and I can take a public project or a private project, bring those in, or even an article, and download the CSV and suck it in and use that information to see if I have anything that matches. So Brendan, do you want to talk about the different PowerShell scripts that we have here?
Yeah, so there's 3 sets of modules which involve a bunch of different commands to work with the APIs. The 2 that we're using in the examples today are the ones for CrowdStrike, so PS Falcon, and for RiskIQ, which is PS RiskIQ. Those 2 modules will underpin the get artifact script that's listed there. And the get artifact script is kind of doing all the work. It's taking the IOCs that we're going to deal with on the RiskIQ side and then inputting them all into CrowdStrike so that we can view detections and that sort of thing. And just, so you guys are aware, as a team, that PS Soldier module I just put online yesterday, actually, built very similarly to the PS RiskIQ module, and it's got a couple commands in there to help pull the sticks data that's available via the threat feed. So the same sort of integration could be set up too for CrowdStrike or even potentially RiskIQ, creating new artifacts and that sort of thing on the RiskIQ side, or new IOCs from that sticks information that's on the H-ISAC feed.
Great. So we're going to go through and demonstrate these types of scripts when we're doing these use cases, because we're trying to make this as real world as possible. Now, we have the installation of the script, so when we get into that point, Brendan will go through and explain what happens and go through the scripts. One of the first exercises that we're going to do is a phishing investigation, a threat hunting, where you look at at known good infrastructure and then find bad stuff. So these techniques that we're going to be doing, you can go look at your own domains, and from that you can easily look to see if anybody is linking to your infrastructure, linking to your cookies, to your trackers, the host pairs. If you're pulling the style sheets or running scripts, you'll be able to see all that information, and we'll go through and explain all about that. But then once we're done with it, we'll be able to take some of that information back into CrowdStrike to see if we have any hits with that data. And then Brendan's going to go through and talk about a ransomware attack and how it was prevented with CrowdStrike, and then we'll go and investigate it in there, and then we'll jump over to RiskIQ and visualize that investigation, understand all of the infrastructure, chain it together to figure out the full extent of that threat actor, and then what the potential risk could be for an organization that was compromised and getting their credentials stolen, on top of having their data encrypted. And then Brendan's going to show another one where we start off with a detection, and we'll move into RiskIQ to expand the investigation. We'll create a project, and then we'll suck that back in to see if there's any other detections. And so we'll do that. Now, before we begin, we want to ask some polling questions, because when we talk about these scenarios, it's important to understand your frame of reference, what your job is, what you're responsible for, so then we can make sure that we address those types of questions you might be thinking about when we're talking. So Barrett, if you can you please kick off some of the polling questions, and we'll begin. Okay, what area of the organization do you work for? Are you an incident response, vulnerability management, SOC, threat analyst? We just like to know, so then we can cater the way that we present the material to you. So let's see. Okay, so we have about 17% are incident response, 22% are vulnerability management, we have 13% of the SOC, and 48% are threat analysts. So I'll make sure that I hit some vulnerability management use cases as well, that I can show you those. Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Okay, do you currently use PassiveTotal? It's important because then I know what level I need to go into, like very high level, or I can go very detailed. I can see how to cater to it, if you already know something or not. Okay, so we have 81% of the people have not used PassiveTotal before. So I'll make sure I explain what each data set is and what they do, and go through that. Okay. To use CrowdStrike Falcon. So about 40% of you, yes, 60% no. Okay, great. Have you clicked on the RiskIQ icon in Falcon? So have you installed the RiskIQ app? That's what we're asking about. Or clicked on the little icon next to like a domain or IP address before? Okay, about 4% yes, 90% no. So we'll go through and explain if you have it installed, if you don't have it installed, and what visibility you would have inside of RiskIQ. Okay. Have you installed the RiskIQ app inside of the CrowdStrike store for your inside of your console? 100% no. So we'll show you how to do it and what the benefits would be to your organization if you did. Okay.
And that's all the poll questions, Benjamin.
Perfect. So now we have a frame of reference. So we understand the level of expertise in the products that you have, and so now we can begin. So what I want to do is I want to level set the playing field and let you understand how we're getting this data and why it's important to have such a rich breadth and depth of information that we can take in and then create new data sets that you probably have never heard about or used. So RiskIQ goes out and scans the entire IP4 space. We communicate to all the IPs and all the domains. We don't do it every day. It takes us a little bit of time to hit everything, but we hit everything. And with that, we know when something was seen first and when we stop seeing that. So that could be a version of software, that could be an IP address, it could be the domain responding, it could be a lot of different things. We also collect over 220 different ports, and we come out from 150 different countries, sourcing from residential, commercial, and mobile IP space. We imitate all the popular browsers, devices, applications, operating systems. And the reason why we do this is that if we were coming out from our own data center and our IP address was very defined, the threat actor would just say, I'm blocking that IP space, I'm filtering it out. And so we would no longer see the data. Threat actors might want to target a particular region of the world. That's why we have to come out from 150 different countries. They might be targeting a special device or operating system or browser. So we have to act like the intended victim. So we act like your parents when we're on the internet, trying to get infected, trying to see what's happening. So then we can understand what's really happening from the perspective of all around the world to bring that information back to you. So one of the cool things is that we simulate like a real user. We actually pull down the full document object model. We'll go to a page, we'll grab a few things, click on a couple things, and maybe another virtual user will go in and take off and grab another section, and then we merge all that data together. We might even go to a search engine, do a search, click on one of the links, and then go from there. So it's highly configurable. So we're acting like a real user from the perspective of a user. And with that, it gives us the ability to understand what you would see or a victim would see. And so we're able to find things like mage cart, like people are going in and putting JavaScript to grab the information from a form, suck that data in and steal it. We're able to see that because we're actually acting like that real user. Okay. So with all those ports in the entire IPv4 space, we look at we do over 2 billion HTTP requests a day. We have terabytes of passive DNS information. We know about the components, what's installed, what's running, the search, the trackers, the cookies, and we map this out. We have over 157 billion relationships across the internet, and we've already mapped it. So when we look at your perspective or somebody else's, we can see how those overlap. And so that's how we can infrastructure chain things together. So with that, if we start with a piece of malware and we analyze it, we can say, hey, that malware was on this IP and there was a certificate associated with that malware that's associated with a domain, and there was some trackers and other certificates of domains, and we build out this chain, we call it the infrastructure chain, to understand that full aspect of what we're dealing with. Now, what we found out was when we talked to analysts like yourselves, that you get open source intelligence like an article, and the first thing you would do is go into PassiveTotal and search for those things to see what is the extent of this infrastructure, is there any more that wasn't published, and does that affect me? So what RiskIQ did was we created this threat intel portal where we took all of those indicators and all of those articles and we made them accessible to. So with that, inside of the portal, you have the actual article, you have all of the documents that were there, but we go through and we pull out every single indicator that was in the published articles, whether it's in a photograph or in text. And we make it available that you can just click on it and query those and see them. So it saves you a tremendous amount of time instead of you having to type them out again. It saves 2 to 3 hours worth of time to do that piece. Now, the other aspect that we did was we had our own security researchers and threat analysts look at that data. And they take that look at that infrastructure that was published and they extend it. And we call these enterprise indicators. So if you have a paid account, we already give you all of those enterprise indicators, all the extra stuff that we found that's related to that published OSINT article. So you now have a jump start to be faster and smarter in your incident response. So we've already done that research that you were doing all the time. We've done it for you. So you can now just open the article, look at the community indicators, look at the enterprise indicators, and from there see what's happening and make a determination right away if it's going to affect you or not. Okay, so with that, we have the historic look to go back in time to understand how everything's happening. So when all this data comes in, because we're gathering it ourselves, or we're grabbing some of this through some sensors, and we might even get some feeds from for passive DNS from around the world because we can't be everywhere at all the time. That data comes in, we capture it, goes into our global inventory. And with that, we're looking at over 250,000 new domains that come up every single day. There's over 5.5 million host resolutions that we're seeing new every day. 106 billion DNS records, We do 2 billion web requests a day, and we have over 300 plus mobile app stores and over 34 million mobile apps in our databases. So as this data comes in, our security research and threat intelligence, they'll look at something. They'll find like if there's anything new that they need to understand or to start tracking, and then that goes to our data scientists, and when they merge yesterday's data with today's data, at that point they can go back in time to the beginning of when we collected data and roll that forward and find those relationships. And that comes out to all of our internet data sets, the host pairs, the whois, the web components, the passive DNS, the trackers, the cookies, the certificates, the mobile apps, the services that we see, and then even our derived data, some of our derived data sets, which are like our accomplice list, like if you're hosting or linking to something that's bad, scam lists, IoTs, domain infringement, IP reputation, phishing lists. We have all these things available as well. So what does that mean for you? Well, we've all seen the cyber kill chain, and most people spend most of their time and attention on what they can control and see, which is from the firewall in. Okay, where RiskIQ lives is on the other side. We live on the open webs. We're seeing everything that's happening out there. So during the recon, the setup, and the weaponization, we're seeing these things, and we're able to alert you and even stop these things about 1 to 4 days before they're active. And then we partner with Flashpoint to bring in the deep and dark web. So how does that help you? So when there's discussions about attacks and asking if there's any credentials for inside of your organization, that's in the deep and dark web. And we can see that through the Flashpoint integration. And then once typo squatted domains are purchased, once your images go online, once they're email capable, once it's now on a park page and now it's active, we can see these things during the setup and weaponization that we can then put it on our blacklist. Microsoft and Google take our blacklist, and within 10 to 15 minutes, it's into their production system. That means 95% of the world's browsers won't go there, okay? You get that red pop-up. And then we can do the takedown, which takes 1 to 4 days to take it down for you if you're a customer. Now, where CrowdStrike lives is on the other side, and they're able to see these things and stop them and track them and know everybody inside the organization, what they did and what happened on all the systems. So over time, if something comes back, we're able to even track that and see it if it's tenacious and even take it down. So when the whack-a-mole happens and they're moving the infrastructure around, we can see it and we can track it and stop it, okay? So one cool thing is that everyone plays on the same battlefield, and with that, we're able to understand what's happening. So everyone emits signals. All of you today, you're on an internet connection. So we know what ISP you're with. We can tell, potentially what type of operating system, if you go and you visit something where we can track that. So everyone's emitting signals. It's like if a tree falls in the woods, does it really make a sound? Well, only if somebody's there to hear it or to record it. And that's what RiskIQ is trying to do on the open internet, is to find all this information and help you. So if we take a look at a threat actor and a target in the internet. So if the threat actor goes online, there's going to be an IP address, there are going to be network blocks, autonomous systems that they're going to go through, and their service provider, just from going online. When they compose the email, there'll be an email provider, a subject, the email body, any attachments, header, the email language, the date and timestamp, and then they send the email. Once it's sent, it goes through the internet, it goes through different networks. You'll see the transit IP addresses, the network blocks, the transit times, the autonomous systems they went through, and it gets to the user. If it's an HTML email, it might link back to the threat actor where they can fingerprint the machine. They can get some additional information. They can know when the person read it, their operating system, and even their geolocation based upon the IP address. So all that information is out there, and it can be collected. So RiskIQ is trying to collect all this information so we can link it together and give you this infrastructure chain of the entire internet. So if we take a look at what we're collecting, the passive DNS, the domain to IP, the whois information, who purchased this domain, the certificates that we see out there. We have millions of certificates that we can click on and find out, where those are in the world. But with GDPR making WHOIS information less relevant today, inside the certificate there might be some common names or information that we can search on and find other relationships. So SSL certs are becoming the new type of WHOIS lookups. Trackers. So these might be different type of analytic codes. It could be HTTP track, somebody's duplicated a website. It could be many different things. So we're monitoring those and showing you where all those exist in the world. The host pairs are the relationships between websites. Like I'm bringing in an image from Facebook, I'm sending Google Analytics out. We understand that in complete map all the time. So with that, we are able to say, this script is actually coming from this site, data is being transferred to this one, and that's part of the infrastructure chain. The host details, the cookies, the hashes, the open source intelligence, the full document object model that we download and collect. That's how we build a lot of these data sets that you probably have never heard of before or used. The headers, the console log messages, the open ports, and the exposed services that you might have. We're able to put all these together. But there's some caveats for data collection, and you probably know this as well, is that you can't be everywhere at once. So if we scan a domain and threat actor compromises it, does something bad, and then changes it back, and then we go back and scan it again, did it really happen? Yeah, but we might not have seen it. So it's really important to have strong analytical leads or solid analytical leads where you can look at a couple different points and say, well, if this is bad, that's suspicious. If that's bad, that's suspicious. But if once I have a couple suspicious things, then I can make the determination that this is probably bad. So we're going to go over that. And we always say you need about 3 solid analytical leads to make a good determination if something's really malicious or not. Okay. So you can be doing these same things in your organization, collecting these logs, having NTP turned on so all your logs have the same timestamp so you can look and reference things correctly in your organization. So everything that RiskIQ is doing on the open internet, you could be doing internally to have that rich information, or using something like CrowdStrike that has a lot of that data in there already natively that you can click on a process. You can say, hey, did anybody go to this domain or website, and be able to know internally everything that happened. Okay, so with these data sets, most people are only familiar with the traditional data sets: passive DNS, WHOIS, DNS records, subdomains, and hashes. But there's more to just these. And this is because we're doing that document object model. We're acting like a real user. So when you think about a website, like if we went to PassiveTotal.org, when we look at that document object model, we get the response as well. We see what's happening. And with that, we start pulling out information. We also see the links. So this is how we're able to look at those host pairs and see how things are coming in and out, how they're referenced. When we get the dependent request. So when we first went out, we went on HTTP and we went to the website, but then it was redirected to HTTPS. And then there was a JavaScript that ran because we have a particular font that we like to use, and it was loaded up through there, through use.typekit.net. So we see all this data, and it's all in there, and we're able to pull this thing out because we're acting like the real user. We even see the cookies. So we have AWS and we have Woopra. We're using Woopra, so we can see those cookies that are in there. So that's how we're able then to start determining some of the applications, the components that might be installed and running. And inside the certificate, we have the organization, we have the where it's located. There's a lot of fields in here that we can search on and pivot to link that data together if, for example, WHOIS information has been redacted and there's no information that's there. So with that, the advanced data sets that we have are certificates, trackers, host pairs, web components, cookies, and exposed services. And these aren't feeds. We're gathering this data ourselves. And because we're gathering it, we know how it links together and we can piece it together. So it makes us have a unique perspective that I can look at a cookie and see everywhere in the world that cookie's used. So for example, if somebody is attacking you, they might be copying your cookies or your trackers. And by searching on your own infrastructure or your own things, you can find bad things that might be attacking you. And that's going to be one of the first examples that we're going to go through. So that brings us now to getting our hands dirty and getting into the products. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go into PassiveTotal, and we're going to do the first search. Now, I've gone through and I have created some nice little links for everybody. So I'm going to go to the chat and I'm going to paste this in. These are all the tools that we might be using, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my browser, okay? And I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to go to community.riskiq.com. So give me a second. I'm just going to maximize this. So it's going to look like this for most of you, okay? This first query that we're going to do it through the classic search. So before we begin, I'm going to go into the account settings, and I'm going to show you what I have, and I'm going to show you where to put that promo code if you haven't put it, so we can get started. So this is where you add the promo code. So when I click on that, I can add the promo code in there. If you're already an enterprise customer or in an enterprise trial, you don't need to enter it. But if you're not, this is where you enter that promo code, okay? Now, if I look at sources, this is where I turn things off or remove them, move that data from the results. So I have hybrid analysis set up, VirusTotal, we have Pingly, emerging threats, Alien Vault, and when I go into these, there might be there's a little cogwheel next to it. I might need to go to that other organization and set up an account, or if it's a paid account that I'm paying for, take my API credentials and bring them back to RiskIQ. So for hybrid analysis, I went and created a free account, created an API credentials and put those in. The same is for Alien Vault. I did that as well. VirusTotal, I don't know if it's free. I think you just need to enable it. There's a API key that you can use in there to link it together. So this is what I have. So if you don't have these things turned on or enabled, your results might look a little bit different, but don't worry. You can always go back in and add those. So I'm going to tell you a scenario, and then we're going to walk through. So let's say we're all threat investigators, and we're working for the Small Business Administration for the U.S. government. And the CARES Act was just published back in March, where they're giving away over $80 million or 80 billion, I think it's $billion, to businesses to get them on their feet. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a search, and we're going to look up the real website. So let me do this real quick for you so you can see this. Let me just take this off so you can see what it looks like. So this is the real website. So what I did was, to do this scenario, was I took a login page, and you can do this as well. So if you have a login page for your organization that the public or doctors or partners can log into and see information, I looked for that. So then what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to start off from a known good. So everyone usually starts off from an alert or a phone call or some problem, but we're going to be proactive today in this investigation. So let's start off with a known good. So if I come into the system and I search for the Small Business Association, so I'm going to give you that link real quick. So here's the domain, okay? I'm going to paste that in so you can have it. And then I am going to give you this first search, okay, to make your life a little bit easier, because we're going to do it inside of the classic PT first, and then we're going to go to the other one. So click on this link and let's bring it up. And I'll walk through the interface because a lot of you have never seen PassiveTotal before. And then we're going to jump through and start doing this investigation to show how to become proactive. So when I search for this, the first thing that pops up is the resolutions tab. So these are the A records. This is the IP address that was responding to this domain, okay? It gives me the location, the country. It gives me the ASN number, so I can see, hey, this is now on Microsoft infrastructure. I get a heat map. So the heat map is 6 months worth of time. So from here to here is six months worth of dates. And every number in here is the number of IP addresses that responded on that day when we went there, okay? The little triangle in the upper right-hand corner means that something new showed up on that day, okay? The curves on the bottom and on the top are the end of a month and the beginning of the month. So the top one is the beginning of the month, the bottom curve is the end of a month. So inside of, in IT, we sometimes don't get notified when we're doing an investigation during the time that we really need to do it. It's always after the fact. So we can actually go into RiskIQ and I can select a particular day, or I can select multiple days by holding the shift key and clicking another section, and limit my results to just see the data that appeared on that particular window of time or particular day. And if I want to see everything, if I had more than 6 months, I would have this data bar here and I can click on it. In this particular case, I'm just going to refresh the browser and see all the data back again. I can also filter by using these checkboxes and X's. So if I click on the checkbox, that will filter to show me those results. If I click on the X, it will remove those results, okay? So that's a way for me to filter. So now let's walk through, and as we walk through this investigation, we're going to go through all the tabs, then we're going to go and start pivoting. And so when you pivot search, there's two different ways that we can do that. One way is I can click directly on it, and that will run a query and leave me a breadcrumb, okay? I'm going to now hit the back button to go back. The other way is I can right-click and open in a new tab. That's the way I prefer to do it, and the reason is, for example, I'm in Chrome, I can have many tabs open, and I can save all those tabs into a bookmark as bookmarks into a folder and have my entire investigation saved. And the reason why I like to do it this way is when we're going down from the trunk of a tree down a branch for the investigation, we might run into a dead end, and I need to jump back to the trunk quickly and then go down another avenue of that investigation. And by having the tabs, it gives me the capability of easily going through and doing that. Okay, so the Whois tab, so if I look at the Whois tab, there's nothing in here. There's no, it's all redacted, it's just government thing, there's no information. If I look at the certificates, I can see where they bought their certificates from. So I can see those, all the subdomains that are associated with the SBA.gov. Now the trackers. Now remember, I mentioned that I can look at my own infrastructure to see if something's good or bad. So if I come in here and I right-click on one of these and open another tab, I can now see every other domain in the world that referenced my tracker. And if I take a look, I can start looking at some of these and see a .ng. Oh, that doesn't look too. A .in, a .br, a .buzz. So right there, those are some indicators this might be bad. So I'm going to go back to the previous tab, okay? And we're going to continue through, and then we're going to start going through and looking at trackers and host pairs to expand our investigation and really see if something's bad or not, okay? So if we look at the components show everything that's running in the first and last day that we saw it. So if you had an old version of something and then you upgraded or you removed it and put something else, we would show you those dates and times. So we can see Microsoft IIS, Azure, and there's 18 things here. If I need to expand the list, I can, or I can page through, okay? The next one is the host pairs. So the host pairs are when these are redirects, links, imports, parent pages. There's a whole list of causes, an XML, HTTP requests, redirects. All those things are shown in this area. So think if you have a map, this is the traffic directions to say what's coming in, what's going out of everything. So if we take a look at the real domain, so if I make that the child hosting, okay? I can see everything that is reaching into that domain and taking things out. So think of it like parent-child relationship. Your parents tell you what to do and you have to follow it. You tell your kids what they can do and you follow it. So there's this hierarchy of relationship. So the parent might say, hey, I need that from you. I'm going to take it, and takes it away. And you might take a toy away from your child. So when we're looking at these relationships, the real domain was referenced in itself. But then I start seeing this government one, the real SBA, it's a typo squatted domain, .oki.ng is also going there, and it has linked references, but it's also doing the CSS import. So by looking at this list of domains that are here, we want to go through and start examining these to say, hey, are these good or bad? And I'm going to show you a couple ways that we can do it to expand this investigation to find these attacks where they're trying to steal credentials of people, businesses, and organizations to get their bank accounts, their employee records, all that stuff, and cause havoc to people and steal identities and steal money. So let's take a look at one of these. So if I right-click on this COVID relief .sba.gov.onki.ng, and I open that up in another tab, okay? So when I do that, I immediately get some additional information. This analyst insights are like questions that analysts always had to say, hey, I need to quickly know if this is a new domain, if something's changed in the records, if it's on a blacklist, or it was and then it was taken off and it came back on, if it was revolving, how many days it's been new, is it on the Alexa 100,000 or not, when was it crawled, all that information. So we can take a look and see NG. So we go, okay, hey, where is NG? So let's look to see where that is. If I open up a tab and I say, what country is NG? Let's see, where is that? Nigeria. Oh, so is the US government outsourcing to Nigeria to host their pages? I doubt it. But this now, I can now start looking and say, hey, that's suspicious. One solid analytical lead. Hey, it's hosting in Nigeria. That's kind of weird. Let's look at the WHOIS information, okay? Oh, it's in Nigeria, okay. That's really strange, okay? Hotmail, so Hotmail, so I didn't know the US government is using Hotmail, okay. Let's look at the certificates. Oh, Let's Encrypt, a free certificate authority. Oh, another red flag, okay. Let's look at the subdomains. Oh, look at all these different COVID relief subdomains they did. Okay, look at all these. Finance, you know, and there's 50 of them. So let's go through and let's just look. All these webmail, they're trying to steal a lot of stuff, okay? Let's look at the trackers. So here's the real Google Tag Manager ID that we had clicked on previously. You can see it referenced here. But do you see this HTT track, okay? That's a tool. So if I right click and say, hey, what is HTT track? Okay, it's a website copier tool that some of you might have used before. I personally have used it before to take something from like QA and put it into production, or dev to QA to production. I've moved websites around using these tools. But what happens is it leaves breadcrumbs. It leaves tracks to say, hey, what was there? So if we take a look at this, it's saying, oh, I'm sorry, I clicked on it. It says this directory, you know, like this path, this website was copied from here, from this login page, and we put out the host so we can search on it. And then the account login is what was actually copied. So we actually see that. And so this is another indicator, say, hey, this was a duplicate. But if I really want to go through and I want to see the image of how it looked like, RiskIQ has that information. If you're a enterprise customer for our external threats, we have that, and we automatically find it and show it to you in our product. But I want to show you with open source tools that you can use today. So if we take a look at, I'll throw this in the link here. Here's URL scan.io. So if I took this domain, I'm going to right click and open in a new tab, okay, just so you can see how you can get here. I can tell it to go out and scan that site, but what I want to do is I want to look up this the bad domain, okay, in any type of search that has previously happened. So I go to searches, okay, and I'm going to I'm sorry, I copied the wrong thing. Hold on. Copy. I'm going to paste that in. So I see I have all these different searches that have already happened. There's a suspended page, there's this account one. So I'm going to click on this account one. And when I do, it will show me different results. So I'm going to go back further in time. Let's look at this. This one might not have data. So let's look at this last one. Okay. So I can look and see, hey, it's an exact copy of the website because they use that HTTP track. It copied everything across. And then I can actually see, hey, is it malicious or not? It doesn't show it in here, but it is malicious. It's a phishing site that's happening. So URL scan.io didn't mark this as malicious, but we can definitely see that this is bad, and here's a copy of it. So if we went through and we looked at the entire list of what was listed here under the trackers, the Google Tag Manager IDs, or under the host pairs, and we started looking at these. So if you take this next one and we open this up in another tab, I'm going to put this in the chat for everybody. We can see, hey, it's blacklisted. It's not been online for several weeks now, but it was. And if we went through and we looked at it the same way, we can see, hey, it's bad. And each one of these that are listed here, okay, as we go through, it's bad. Here's another one, the Unimax. So this technique I'm showing you, you can look at your own infrastructure and start finding things that are hurting your organization or trying to attack your organization or your customers or partners. So I want to show that. Now, one thing I want to do is I want to go back now and I want to search for the Small Business Association through this interface now. So this is our threat intel interface. So if I came here and I looked for, let's just look here, sba.gov. Copy, sorry. I'm just going to look for sba.gov, okay? So when I look for that, it starts looking for any articles, any published research, open source intelligence. So think of this threat intel thing as like, I want to search for something that's malware related, something that's bad, that's attacking people. You can search here and you can see it, but it doesn't exact match. So if you don't see results come back, you might need to go to the classic PT interface and search again, okay? So just be aware of that. So if we open this up, this starts to show you community indicators and enterprise indicators I told you about. So remember I mentioned that if there was something published, like for example, there was an article that was published. Here's the article. We're going to open that up. And inside of here talked about this attack that they found some people that were targeting the website, okay? But there was only 6 indicators listed there. But as we went through and we saw, there's quite a few more. We had that tracker. We found some hashes. We see the full pages, like when we looked at that URL scan, you saw the full path of what they look like. And there were 12 domains that we found that were extra, okay? So what can happen now is I can take this information and bring it back into CrowdStrike. So Brendan, so what I like to do is I want to see if we can make you presenter and you can show how to take these indicators. Like I can come here and say download, and I can download the CSV file. Okay, so I'll just open it up real quick so people can see what it looks like. And inside of here, it's going to have those indicators all in here. So they're all tagged. I see them all, but then I want to do something with it. Okay. So Brendan, I'm going to make you presenter.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So now you're going to see the magic. Okay. So this is like the real magic that it makes me excited because Brendan was amazing with his skill. So please go through the scripts and then explain, how they work and what we're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Benjamin mentioned, the first part for actually taking those IOCs and getting them into CrowdStrike is getting this article. The script that I wrote, the get artifact script, can input the IOCs that are contained in an article export, so that CSV file, or it can take the artifacts that are part of a project. So the project part will show a little bit later. Right now, it's going to be related to those article IOCs. The second part that you need to keep in mind is that in order to run the script that I'm about to show, you'll have to have those two modules installed. So that's the PS Falcon module and the PS RiskIQ module. And then finally, you have to have PowerShell. So in the case of Macs and Linux devices, you can install PowerShell Core, which is available on Microsoft's GitHub. And once that's installed, you run the pwsh command, which you can see right up here in the title, to get into your PowerShell prompt. Once inside of PowerShell, you can then install those modules and get that get artifact script, which are up on those GitHub links that we provided earlier in the slideshow, and I can enter those into chat here in a little bit as well. And then once you're in your PowerShell prompt, you can just run install module PS Falcon, and that will download PS Falcon, the CrowdStrike module from the PowerShell gallery, which is one of the two requirements for the script. And then you'll also want to do install module PS RiskIQ. You may get a warning that you need to add in the scope current user, depending on your security policy for your machine. So keep that in mind. If you do have to add that in, that's not a problem. None of these scripts are really, admin level modules or anything like that, because all you're doing is interacting with the APIs and pushing and pulling data back and forth. So like Benjamin mentioned, I grabbed the enterprise indicators that are listed with this SBA COVID-19 article. So I just hit this little download indicators and got that CSV, which is currently sitting in my home directory. You can see it right here, the PassiveTotal article. So the get artifact script, I'm going to run that. It'll call up the modules that it requires. And if you have not entered in your authentication information for either CrowdStrike or RiskIQ, you'll be prompted to put those in. It's slightly different between the two platforms. On CrowdStrike, you're going to have an ID and secret that you generate. On RiskIQ, you'll have an API key that you generate under your account settings. So just to run it really quick here, when I call up the script, I'm going to just put in the script name with that / referencing the path that I'm in right now. And then the script or the article, I'm going to use the -CSV parameter, which is specifying that I'm using an article, the CSV export. And then I'm just going to use the PassiveTotal article that we downloaded. So I'm going to hit enter there, and you'll see that it calls up and it tells you how many results there are and the name of the article. There was actually one of the results in there that may have been an invalid hash value, so it popped out that message. But the rest of the IOCs were input directly into CrowdStrike. And the nice thing about the way the IOCs are created is that you can set things like detection policies and expiration dates. So you can use this as a way to kind of scan your environment, right, and see if anybody has contacted any of these bad domains that we found in the article or as part of Ben's investigation, because much like RiskIQ, CrowdStrike is keeping an eye on what's happening, although we're doing it inside, looking at your devices on your network, watching that process history and activity that your programs are performing, whether malicious or not, and keeping track of it. So once those IOCs are put in, you'll get those detections should you choose to enable that detection policy. And then finally, as part of the output of the script, it actually will show you all the IOCs that it added, the different type, the value of the IOC, that policy that I mentioned. So in this case, I set it to detect, that is generate a detection, and then set it to expire after 1 day. Because of that retroactive scan, this is essentially kind of a one-time, I'm going to check and see if I have any history of these indicators in my account. And then finally, it shows me where it came from in case I need to reference that later. And then just to pop over to the CrowdStrike portal, I can look and see if any of those popped up, and I actually have one right here that I'll dive into. But before I wanted to go into that a little bit deeper, I kind of wanted to explain, who's CrowdStrike, what do we do? Because it looked like quite a few people haven't used CrowdStrike yet. So just for reference, CrowdStrike is an endpoint protection platform that uses one single sensor to power all the different aspects. So that means, one piece of software gives you the ability to replace your legacy AV, gives you EDR capabilities, so watching that process history over time, which comes in handy with things like the custom IOCs, or even doing things like asset reporting or vulnerability reporting. All of that data is streamed up to a private cloud instance, which means that, as your devices are actually having this activity, you're getting reported up to you within seconds so that you can query across your entire environment, look for particular event types, threat hunt, and find those malicious unknowns that you don't know about yet, or even just, rely on the detections that are coming in for that malicious activity as it occurs. In the case of the IOCs that we input, you'll notice that it actually already generated one IOC that was related to that article, and you can see that it matches, a previous process execution. So that means this history was already there, but importing the article triggered that detection and generated the alert that you see right now. So I can, see those previous things that already happened. I can tell that it was tied to a custom IOC, and I can see the activity that spawned that detection. So in this case, I actually, browsed to one of those sites, safely sinkholed, obviously in this case, but the Chrome browser called up that DNS request, which I can see down here at the bottom when I look at the DNS request section. And I can see that that bad domain that was masquerading as one of those SBA login pages.
Hey, Brendan, can you, this is a good point to show the icon.
Yeah.
And then show what happens when you click on the icon, and then show the app, the RiskIQ app in the App Store.
Yeah, great call out. So with these DNS requests and IP addresses that show up within a CrowdStrike detection, you'll notice that RiskIQ app. So this is for the RiskIQ integration that we have between our two platforms. One of the things that CrowdStrike can do, because we are a cloud native, solution, the data's in the cloud. If you decide to partner up with companies like RiskIQ, you can set up that integration and share, indicators back and forth or other data for, different types of solutions. And with RiskIQ here, we integrated this button, which allows you to pivot directly over to RiskIQ and look for that particular indicator. So this one, once I clicked on it, you can find out more information about the domain and see, we're getting different tags and all the same sections that we saw as Ben was walking through his investigation.
Can I mention one thing? So
Sure.
If you don't have the CrowdStrike app installed in Falcon, if you're using CrowdStrike, then you don't get a CrowdStrike tab inside of PassiveTotal. You just get a link to go search for that information inside of RiskIQ, okay? But if you have the app installed, then you can see from the PassiveTotal interface if anybody reached out to that domain and see which machine did, or CrowdStrike Intel.
Yep, and there will be different buttons that show up depending on those intel threats that are related to CrowdStrike's intelligence investigations and the data that we have, and they'll show up along the top with the insights or down on these buttons as well.
Hey, Brendan, we have a question. Does CrowdStrike make sense to use on devices managed by a mobile device manager, e.g. Windows tablet managed by Workspace ONE UEM?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're using mobile devices, they'll be roaming around, they'll be using different internet connections, and because everything basically just relies on an internet connection for you to see this sort of history, Once you get our sensor on there, that means you'll have that constant tether to figure out, is anything bad happening? Do I need to investigate this machine or take some sort of action? And whether it's managed by a platform or not, the CrowdStrike sensor will also give you tools to reach out and interact with that device. You'll note that it's different depending on the different platforms, the sorts of features that are available, and the different focus that we have. However, with Windows, that's everything that I will be talking about today is included in there, and that also means that this data, whether it shows up on a Windows device or some other one, you're still going to get those same sort of integrations with RiskIQ. And then on top of that, whether or not the device is online, you do still have protections that are built into that sensor if you're using those related modules.
Hey,
Perfect.
Brendan,
Thanks.
can you show the App Store and what it would take to get the RiskIQ app installed?
Yeah, so as part of those integrations that we can do, you can browse all those from the CrowdStrike store. We have a list of those partner applications of which RiskIQ is a partner, and then we'll have things like what we call third-party integrations, which are those more traditional type of API to API type setups that require a bit more configuration on the customer side. Whereas these partner apps are truly kind of back-end, app store type installation. So you decide you want to set this up, you want to add in that RiskIQ integration, you can come to this RiskIQ Illuminate app and you can click try it free. You'll notice in my account, I don't have that integration directly here. So clicking this would take me to the setup, and I go through and get that enabled, and then it would give me those buttons that Benjamin was talking about once I click on those detections and pivot over to RiskIQ.
Yeah, so let me just mention, so if you click on
Sure.
the install, what it does is it takes your API keys from CrowdStrike and it goes to PassiveTotal. And inside of PassiveTotal, if you're already a part of an organization and an admin there, it will provision everybody in your organization to start using the CrowdStrike. If not, it will create an organization, put you as the admin in that org because you're the admin of Falcon, and then you can invite people in your organization to join your org in PassiveTotal to see that CrowdStrike tab come across.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, so Ben, did you want me to dive in any deeper on this detection, or should we?
It's up to you. You can go to the next one, the ransomware one. Do you want me to show the slide and then go back, or do you want to just talk?
Yeah, why don't we just move on to the next one and start talking about that and talk about the infrastructure on the RiskIQ side.
Okay.
So, CrowdStrike looks for a lot of different things, whether it's that sort of behavior, looking for something like reaching out to a particular domain. I could set up those custom IOCs and alert when that thing happens based off that data that came in from RiskIQ like we did with the script, or I can even just search for it using our event search. So, if I wanted to figure out if someone reached out to the bad domain that was listed here, I can copy that domain and I can just, look it up instead of doing the whole IOC import if I didn't want to kind of be alerted on that sort of activity, and I just wanted to, check it out at first before I set up those alerts. So lots of flexibility when it comes to going through and hunting for that data or searching for those sorts of events. And then we also have all sorts of different, behavioral indicators, machine learning based for, malware analysis or process activity. There's lots of different ways that these detections are being generated. And then on top of that, prevention. So protecting your computer from those bad things happening without you having to do anything. In that case, I have a sample detection here where a computer reached out through PowerShell, downloaded a ransomware sample, and then attempted to execute. And so you can see that as I go through the chain here, the sort of visibility that Falcon can provide on top of solutions that you might be used to, right? Instead of just understanding maybe the end, detection here, which you might get with like a legacy AV solution of this file's bad, here's a hash, that maybe this is the time that somebody tried to execute it. you see everything leading up to that activity. So in this case, I can see, and because this was a test of the malware, I opened up a command prompt, ran a PowerShell command, which actually was an encrypted or an encoded command in base 64. So, looking at it right here, if I were to look at like Windows logs, right, I'm going to have to go through and decode that to understand exactly what happened. But Falcon can actually just show you that right directly in the detection, so you can see what happened to kind of kick off those additional processes and then eventually get us to that malware execution piece. So you can see that it just did a simple call out to a bad domain, this decryptor.cc, which we'll look into a little bit more in a moment, and then downloaded the executable and then launched it. And in this case, this create suspended process is just a way to kind of load it up in memory without fully executing it, so that it doesn't make any changes to my VM and doesn't potentially reach out to that bad domain. But it's enough for our sensor to say, hey, I see exactly what's happening. This executable's starting to load up, and I'm going to step in. I'm going to terminate it, and then I'm going to generate a detection so that the administrator, or me in this case, can see that activity. It's important to note too, we'll show you, information around the host that it occurred on, what time it happened, the user that it was running under, process information. We'll also give you the ability to interact with that device, so I can, connect to it and start responding to the incident immediately without having to, go down and pull a cable out or anything like that. I can also quarantine the device, so if I'm worried about it communicating out with other devices on my network, or potentially other devices on the internet, I can shut off that communication and stop that from occurring. And then really where the bigger picture comes in, you'll notice as you move down the sidebar here, you'll get different context that comes in with the detection. So I can see first, this file was quarantined, and if I click on the eye, it will take me over to my quarantine and show me the executable and information about it, more hash information, other versions of hashes, types, and will also automatically sandbox and detonate those quarantine executables. So once our machine learning algorithm goes in and says, hey, this is a bad file, we'll snatch it off the disk, we'll detonate it, and we'll give you those results so you can see if this did detonate, what would have happened. And I can, dive in even deeper and look at that full sandbox report, which is powered by Hybrid Analysis, which Ben mentioned earlier, which is a CrowdStrike company. And then I can find out, number one, what is this malware? Potentially, is it related to a threat actor? In this case, it is. It's known to be related to Pinchy Spider. And then again, what would have happened had it executed on this machine, which thankfully the Falcon sensor protected this device from, this piece of malware based on that machine learning algorithm. Okay. So I think the only other thing that I'd want to point out before we take a look and see more about that decryptor.cc domain in RiskIQ is you'll note too, besides the quarantine files and that sandbox analysis that we saw, you can also see that related intelligence directly in the detection. So when we've got the bad executable and we've got it being linked to Pinchy Spider, I can go over and see more about who Pinchy Spider is and related indicators with that hash, other domains that it may communicate with. But we're going to take a look at that on the RiskIQ side. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, Ben, if you want to grab
Sure.
it back and start looking at that infrastructure.
I'll grab it. Okay, so we'll start off inside of RiskIQ. Okay, so I really want to map this out and show you how we can build those infrastructure chains. So I'm going to start off in community inside of the new interface. Okay, and let's look for Pinchy Spider. So when I do that, you'll see an article pop up. So let's open up that article. So inside this article, we get a little graph and there's some information in here. There are community indicators, but there aren't any enterprise indicators. And it's because RiskIQ went out and gathered this information on our own, and we're making it available to the entire public. If we're taking an open source article that somebody else published and then we found some additional information, that becomes enterprise indicators. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the first domain that Brendan talked about, which is this decryptor.cc. So if you see this here, if you right click and open that up in another tab, okay, that's going to take you out to the classic PT, and we're going to start this investigation. And I want to walk through this. And the reason why I want to walk through it is I want to show how you can piece this together yourself, because a lot of you haven't done this before in our platform, to understand the full extent of this infrastructure. So when we search for this decryptor.cc, and I will copy this and paste it into the chat, so then you can just jump there if you need to, okay? So the first of all, you see the CrowdStrike Intel information. So Brendan talked about this, he showed it in CrowdStrike, but that comes across right away. So for a threat analyst, you can look and say, oh, it's bad, and I immediately know that it's Pinchy Spider, it is malicious, it's criminal, and I have its payment address stuff. So it's basically encrypting ransomware on your machine and then selling your credentials that it's gathered for Windows machines out on the deep and dark web. So let's go through and let's see what we can do. So if you start right-clicking and open these up in a different tab, you're going to see one of the IPs is going to go to another domain. So I'm going to give you a minute for you to go through and try to expand this investigation to find a related decryptor domain. Okay, it'll be another domain with a different type of cryptor dot something at the end of it. And while you're doing that, this is an article from Reddit where somebody that got compromised, this is what it would look like. And they want you to pay your Bitcoins to them. So when we go through and we look at this decryptor.cc, one particular IP address, the 87.78, so the 87.78, which is down here, which is in Russia, okay? When we look at that, we will immediately see some other domains listed. And one of the domains listed is a decryptor.top domain, okay? So if we right click on this decryptor.top and we open it up, we're going to see a bunch of new domains, and we're going to see more CrowdStrike Intelligence coming across, okay? Now, one thing I forgot to mention that I want to just jump back and show you is under the decryptor.cc, in my CrowdStrike tab, I show that a machine went out there, okay? So this gives me the ability for me as I'm pivoting around, if I see a number next to the CrowdStrike tab, means an internal system reached out to the domain or IP address in question that we looked at. So I just wanted to show you that information. And then the intelligence is all the extra intelligence information that was on that. So we'll go back to the decryptor.top. There's more CrowdStrike Intelligence associated with it. Now, it's active, okay? And it started on August 7th, 2020, and it's still active, okay? If we look at the legend, we can see all of the different types of stuff. So green means it's routable, non-routable. Blue means it's a routable IP address. Gray means it's non-routable. And you're probably thinking, how do you see non-routable IP addresses on the internet if you're scanning the internet? What happens is when we go out to the name servers under the who has records, we pull all the records of the name servers, every single one, whether it is a 127 address or a 192 or a public IP, we pull them all and we link them together. So we're able to see if something was offline for a while, then became online and offline, and we're able to show that relationship over time. So another one of these is going to have another relationship in here. So start going through and taking a look. And while you're doing that, I'm going to start going through some of these tabs and looking at different information, okay? So if we look at the host pair, we can see how they're communicating with each other, but there's another IP address I want you to find, the 187.100. So if we take a look at that particular one, sorry, 187.100. So this one is right here. It's in the US. So if we take a look at this one, we'll see a link to this thing called blackpass.bz, okay? And it's linking out to the decryptor.top. So they were using the same IP address for at one point in time. And we can see the first and last scene. So this was back in 2019, okay? Because we have over 10 years of history, we're able to bring these things together. So if we look at this blackpass.bz and we go, hey, what is this? If we search for that on Google, we'll see that it's this BlackPass marketplace. It's part of the deep and dark web where they're selling credentials, okay? So once they encrypt your machines and you pay the ransom, they already have your credentials. They turn around and they sell those to threat actors to get into your organizations. So when you have one of these events, even though you go back in and you revert back to old backups and clean your machines, your credentials might have been stolen and you might need to go in and reset the credentials for your organization. So just bear that in mind. So if we search on this, we can actually see the deep and dark web, the onion information, and you can see right here there's a special link on how to get there. One thing I want to show you that's pretty cool is if I go into RiskIQ and I click on that blackpass.bz, I can look at trackers. And inside the trackers, we're mapping out all those Tor hidden service addresses. So like that onion address that if you have the Tor browser you can get to, we're mapping that out to where it really is. So if we take a look at this value here and I open that up in another tab, it will now show me everywhere in the world that that was linked at one point in time. And you can see back from 2018 to present how that is linked together. So all those bad Tor hidden addresses, we know how they really are on the internet, how they link together. Now, if you try to go to this password website, you have to be vetted. You have to have a login just to see the page. But this is how we're able to link that together. So if I wanted to, if I brought that up inside of Maltego, which is a link analysis tool, I can actually map out everything that we've looked at, starting from the decryptor.cc. So let's find the decryptor.cc. When I map out the infrastructure, so what I did here was I came in and right-clicked and said, I've installed the RiskIQ APIs inside of Maltego to run transforms, which are the API queries to go grab the data and bring it back and visualize it. So I told it to show me the passive DNS information in the any type of host pair relationships that come up. And you can see that this decryptor.cc had many different IP addresses. It linked to another IP address that linked out to the top one that we went to. And then that branched out to different ones. And as we go through and we link this out, you can see it goes down to this blackpass.bz. And that one has all of these active IP addresses on there linking out to that Tor hidden address. And if we searched on this one, we would see all those other ones that were there in the past. But this gives you a way to visualize the data that RiskIQ had in the tab format to give you that rich information that you can really take action with. So I also did one for the SBA one that we had done as well. I forgot to show you this. So I'll quickly just show it to you. So remember, we started off with the known good infrastructure, which is here, and that one Google Analytic code. And you can see by looking at these domains that these 3 different domains, or these 4 different domains, actually had shared infrastructure within each other. So they're probably all interconnected, interrelated, probably the same threat actor targeting the small business administration. But by visualizing this data together, you can see these relationships of these domains were sharing IP addresses and certificates between each other. So it's a good way to really visualize the information and see how that threat actor really, how they're interconnected, in this case, probably the same one. So Brendan, is there anything else you want me to do? Want me to turn it back to you?
Yeah, we could take a look at the last detection.
Okay, so let me turn it back to you. I'm going to make you presenter.
Okay. So much like the ransomware detection that I had generated for that particular hash, there's another attack that we have an example of, and we're going to use this to look in RiskIQ and build out a project with some information around other domains that are related to this one, and figure out how we can use that in the CrowdStrike side. So just to start off, looking at this detection, it's slightly different. It's not malware related. It is kind of a little bit of infrastructure used by another threat actor, another spider in this case. But what happened here was I have a PowerShell actually reaching out to a known bad domain, this dropbox-download-eu.com. And in this case, it's actually generating a shell when it connects to that domain. So I'm getting command prompt access and then running some basic recon commands and then attempting some lateral movement. And I can step through each one of these nodes and see what's happening and what CrowdStrike is triggering on as that occurs. First off, obviously, we saw that the domain was bad. This was one that was already known by CrowdStrike Intelligence, and that's highlighted right here. So as we do our research, out on the web and through these different threat actors and incident response investigations, all that sort of intelligence is put directly back into the platform, which means that those things that we gather, that evidence is automatically relevant to you and your organization. Because we'll alert directly off that and or even generate preventions directly off that intelligence. And so that was one of those triggers. The next one here is that a DLL related to an interpreter was loaded in memory from this PowerShell execution. So all this happened basically fileless, with no malware. Once we dropped to that command prompt, then it let me, obviously run some commands through that interpreter shell. So basic trying to figure out who I am, what I'm connected to. And then in this case, I used a living off the land binary, the bits admin tool, to download a PassiveTotal.exe and then execute it against another computer. So these are some of the tactics that you'd expect to see, as like maybe a spear phishing email came through, there was a bad macro in it, that bad macro maybe launched that PowerShell command that reached out, downloaded other tools, or opened up that remote command and control. And then once a threat actor's in an environment, they're going to start using those other tools that they have access to, especially ones that'll fly under the radar through things like admin tools like bits admin or PassiveTotal to move between computers. And that's where that EDR functionality really is highlighted. Number one, obviously, because you can see that activity. But number two, we go above and beyond just thinking about those typical bad files and talk about actually what's happening in those other tools in the context that those things are occurring is really what moves that protection to the next level. So from here, running that bits admin download, you can see that it reached out to, in this case, a good domain and got the exe and saved it. And then I finally tried to move to another computer by actually adding in a registry key to run basically the same PowerShell command to start up that shell at boot for that next system. So from looking at it here, you'll notice that this is where the detection kind of stops, and that's because detections in the CrowdStrike platform are tied to processes. So as you see things, go down kind of the tree, this executable kicked off this one, and so on and so on. We'll keep tracking that as long as that process tree keeps going, as long as that computer is on. But let's say something like this happens where you've got a registry key that's input on another computer. And obviously that's not the same process, right? That's a totally different machine. So there may be a detection generated based off this particular event, or maybe I just want to kind of confirm who this computer is because all I've got is the IP address. So I can take bits of this string, like in this case, I'll take the actual command to input the registry key, and I can pivot over to the event search, and it'll show me the computer that occurred on. So I can see the host name, I can confirm that it's the right computer based on the local IP address that's here, and say, okay, right, I've got the connection between those two machines, and I can make that make that connection. And then finally, you'll notice that there is a contextual alert right there. So I've got that, suspicious registry change, but also it's important to note that you can view these two incidents together through what CrowdStrike calls an incident. So through our incident workbench, we take those detections that are related to one another and link them. So you can see those kind of detections that happen across multiple processes or multiple computers, and we'll draw that out. So you've got a similar tree right here that's showing me that command prompt, the bits-admin .exe occurring on that first computer, and then also that lateral movement. So I've got the first link in the chain showing me that there was an authenticated connection between the two computers, right? I was using actually the same credentials between the two machines because it's a VMware, cloned image. And then second, I can see that lateral movement with that ps-exec command. So coming from that initial computer, I can see the time that it happened, the source, the executable that was involved, and then finally I can follow that chain out and see that registry command adding that registry key and really piece those two together. And that way I get a whole picture of, okay, how many computers were involved, how are they related to one another, and it's all within context between those two machines. So from here, we're going to take what we know about this attack, in this case, this bad domain, and figure out, okay, I know one bad domain, right? But why is that, domain bad? I can obviously use the CrowdStrike intelligence that's linked from the known bad domain and find out more about it. So I can see that, it's related to the get and go loader. I can view information about the get and go loader campaign, in this case, for different regions across the world. I can graph related indicators, other ones that CrowdStrike Intelligence knows about. And when I click that, it will show me the other indicators that have been associated with this Dropbox download EU, and if it's been seen on any of my devices. So in this case, you can see a couple of them have reached out to these bad domains, and I can click on those individual hosts and find out what hosts they were and what time those call outs occurred. And then I can see that process activity in this case, right? Because this recently happened, and I can pivot back to that PowerShell detection. But you'll notice that there's a pretty small number of domains here related to this particular report, because we in the intelligence report, we're focused kind of on an individual slice or occurrence, whereas we can pivot back over to RiskIQ and start digging into this domain and see if we can find anything else that's associated with it, and then bring that back over using that script again and a project ID to figure out if any other domains that are related to this more broadly might be in my environment as well. So for that, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back to Benjamin, and we'll go through that piece.
Okay, so can everyone see my screen now? So
yep, looking good.
Okay. So what I'm doing right now is in the chat, I put in this query to make your life easier. So we have this Dropbox-download-eu.com. Bad site. It's a real bad site. We don't want to go there directly. So if you search for this inside of RiskIQ, there's no threat intel that RiskIQ has on this. So we're going to go into the classic PT to get more information about it. So if you click on this little arrow here, it will automatically run that PT query. So when we run this query, we get the CrowdStrike intel about this known bad domain. I don't have anybody in my particular CrowdStrike instance that have gone there on this particular domain. But let's start going through and looking at the data that's in here and see what we can see. So if I take a look at subdomains, I can start seeing this naming convention. Now with subdomains, every domain that's listed here can have completely different infrastructure associated with it. So it's an avenue of investigation you should look at. And in my particular case, I'm going to look at this Dropbox-dl2.dropbox. So if I open this up in another tab, you're going to see that I'm going to have a hit on this particular one. I actually have two machines that have gone to this bad domain, okay? So it's really important to make sure that just because I went to the main domain, subdomains might have information I don't know about. So as threat investigators, don't pass up looking at the subdomains, okay? So I wanted to point that out. So if I go back to the original domain, I'm gonna walk through these tabs and we're gonna start looking at some of the data. So if we look at the who is data, you know, sometimes they're good, sometimes it's not good. There's like you can use it or it's useful or it's not. So if we take a look at the email address, whois-protect@hotmail.com, that's a fake privacy protection email address. It's not real. It's not the real one that you would normally see. It's also in Beijing. It's in China, okay? But there's a telephone number associated with this. So what I generally find is telephone numbers are usually high fidelity. You usually get good results out of them because in order to buy domains some places, they really need a real telephone number to contact the person. So these threat actors don't have a lot of infrastructure, so they might reuse some of their information. So if we see this telephone number here, if I right click on this and I open this up in another tab, okay, I will now see every domain in the world where this telephone number was used to register. And you can see I have a ton of stuff in here. I have Netflix, all these things. There's 39 different ones in here. There's a QuickBooks. And if I look at this who is history, it actually goes back and there's 67 in here over the history. So what I want to do is I want to start adding these things into what we call a project. And a project is like a case file, okay? That we can make it public to the world. I can make it private to my organization or private to just me. So let's go through and do this. So it's only showing 25. So I want to show all of them. So I'm just going to pick a number larger than what is listed there so I can see everything. So I'm going to see all 67. So I'm going to add all of these domains in there. So if I right click here, I can select this page. So it's 67 of them, okay? And I can say add to project. So if I want to add it to an existing project, it's here, but I'm going to do a new project, okay? And there's 3 different types of projects. Public, everybody in the world. Be careful with that one because that's the default. And if you're investigating a threat actor and you make it public, they might find it. Team project is for your organization. So everybody that's part of your organization, that's part of the setup. An analyst project means it's just yourself. So if you're investigating somebody internally and you don't want people to see, you can make it an analyst project. So I'm going to make it a team project, okay? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share this with somebody else. So in this particular case, I am going to share this with Brendan. So I'm going to take Brendan's email address that I had copied, and I'm going to add him as a collaborator, okay? So what will happen is, add to project, new project. I'm going to refresh. What happens is GoToMeeting sometimes freaks out when we're doing this. So I'm going to select him, add to project. Come on. Here we go. New project. Here we go. I'm adding Brendan. Okay, I'm going to make this a team project, and I'm going to call this one Threat Hunting Workshop H-ISAC.
You want to double check that visibility. I think it went too far when you clicked it.
Okay, here we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes. Okay, I can add tags in here, and now I'm going to submit it. So now that I submit it, you'll get a little pop-up up here that says, hey, projects are added to Artifact. So if I go to any of these, I can immediately see the project. So another way to see it is on the left-hand side, I can go to projects, and inside of here, I can go to my projects, and we'll see this one in here, and we can see all of the artifacts that are here. Now, what's nice about this is there's a history. So any project that's in the system, we show where the data came from and who did it. So it's a good way to even go back and look at a public project that's been published to see how did the investigation change over time? What happened? Now inside of here, I can turn on monitors. So if an IP address changes on this domain, I'll get notified and it'll get alerted. And then I can look at those alerts and say, oh yeah, that should be part of the project. I want to monitor it. I can put it in there. So you can have these for all of your cases that you're working on. And then when you close out the case, you can still keep the project running. And then you can go back later in time to see if anything changed. Because with all of us, when we put out one fire, we're on to the next one. And sometimes we don't have time to go back. But this gives you the capability of having a way to quickly go back to a previous investigation and see if anything's popped up again, okay? So now that I have this information, there is an actual project number that's up here, this unique identifier that Brendan can use to pull those indicators back into CrowdStrike. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this back over to Brendan, okay, to take these indicators and do something with it inside the CrowdStrike system. So Brendan, I'm gonna make you presenter. But before I do that, Brendan, I want to walk through I showed how to find these indicators and put them in, but I really didn't walk through this real well for this investigation. So let me walk through the entire case, and then we have the project file that we added these indicators in so we can see what's happening. So if we look at this Dropbox download.eu, okay, and we look at the certificates, we can see that, hey, it's Let's Encrypt. So that's a free certificate authority. It's not really that good. As we go through and we look at, for example, the subdomains, we found out that there's this naming convention, DL1, DL2, DL3, with these. So as we go through and look at these other domains, we might see that same type of naming convention that's there. But when we look at the trackers, we can see this IP log ID. And if we look at this and go, what's this IP log ID? If we look at that, IP logger is this piece of code that you can run to start tracking individuals, to say where they're from. It kind of fingerprints their machine to say what type of device and where they are. So the threat actor is fingerprinting these people to find out where in the world they are and what type of machines that they're using through this IP shortener that they're using. So they're using this special piece of code that has this invisible image that's on the machines to track these people, okay? And as we walk through and we look at different aspects, if we go and look at different pieces, we can see the cookies. So here's the cookie that's there, this IP logger. It's looking at the time zone to figure out where in the world this person is when they're online to kind of narrow it down a little bit more. So these are some aspects of the investigation that you can roll out and find all these different domains and start searching on them. And even the WHOIS record with this privacy email address, you could have searched on as well to get additional information. So inside of here, there are 2,000 other IP addresses that were registered with that fake privacy protection email address as well, that you can also put into your system as well and add to the project. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple and just keep it to that telephone number and the 67 that are there. So Brendan, I will turn it back to you to do some magic.
Okay.
Okay, so let me make you presenter. And here you go.
So from here, the important part to get this information that we gathered back into CrowdStrike to look for other activity is to grab that project ID. So going up into the project page that Benjamin just shared with me, I can see that project ID right up here at the top, and then I can use that same get artifact script and specify that project ID rather than the CSV like we did before. And what it'll do is it will find or it'll call the API directly, grab the artifacts that are in the project, and then it will import those into CrowdStrike just like it did for the CSV. So in this case, right, I've got 39 domains that were added that I can see in the project itself, and just like the last one, I've got that output CSV with the project ID associated with it, and I can double check and see all those new domains that were added in there. And just like before, it'll go through and it'll look through my retroactive history to see if any of my computers communicated with any of these domains that I just added using the script. Generally, that takes a couple minutes to go through and look at that history, but that's the benefit of having everything up in the cloud, is that you can retroactively look at that stuff without having to query the endpoints directly for that history and keep all those things on disk. It's all stored and checked automatically on your behalf as you import these new IOCs. So we'll give that a minute to generate that detection, but if one of those comes up, then we'll have that activity, and we can also, just like before, if I wanted to search for any one of those particular domains and see if I found any results, which I know in this case one of them will trigger based off my browsing activity, kind of like for the SBA article that we looked at before. I can look back at that history and find those individual events, looking for those known bad domains. So I know once the IOC has a chance to go through and calculate all that history, we'll see that this one particular domain, the QuickBooksDoc.com, is going to generate one of those IOC events. And give that a moment. But any other further investigation, if I wanted to look for any one of those other domains, or hashes that may be associated with something like that, if another threat source comes in with those hash IDs, that's definitely an option too.
So one thing to think about is that CrowdStrike and RiskIQ can't be everywhere at once, and our threat intel might have holes, but together we're more complete. So the CrowdStrike Intel people might not have found the domains that we found yet, but as they go through and things pop up, they would find them. So it's really good to have the 360-degree visibility, the outside view that RiskIQ gives, and an inside view that, like CrowdStrike, their EDR and threat intel give you, based upon what they've seen on the inside. The merging of those two things together gives you a complete picture. And that's what you really need to be able to do, is to plug all the holes to know what's on the outside and what's on the inside, and merge those together to give you the proper visibility of what you need to do in your organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So was there anything that you wanted to add to that project investigation, Ben, while we wait for this to trigger? Or
no, but so let me ask Barrett, are there any questions that came in, or would John like to say hi to the audience before we show that piece?
Yeah, Benjamin, we had a couple questions earlier around just PassiveTotal, and if you could talk a little bit more about the community versus enterprise and the difference there.
Okay, so inside of RiskIQ, now that you've seen our data and you see what's happening, if we look at if we look inside of, let me just pull up an IP address so you can see. Certain types of data types, we call those advanced data sets, and those are the enterprise data sets that you need to have a paid account to see. So for example, trackers, components, cookies, and host pairs would be considered advanced data sets. The certificates is an advanced data set, but we're giving that to organizations. So if you sign up with an organizational email address, you'll see them, because who has data is a hit and miss if it's going to help you or not because of GDPR. But certificates, everybody's using them, and that data that's inside the certificate can be used to link IPs to domains. So we're giving that away to organizations. Now, one of the other ones that we're giving away is the services. And the services piece is important because it's going back and looking at a 14-day window of time to say what ports and services and the banners that are coming back. So like most security professionals, you might even set up some of your services to use non-standard ports to kind of obfuscate your data or hide in plain sight. But we're actually bringing in the banners and the responses to know what was there and to be able to figure out what's occurring there. Now, one thing I did was I did a search for like Windows Remote Desktop. So there's over 24 million of these out there. So like if someone takes your credentials and sells them, they already know what IP address has these types of things out there. And if we look inside of one of these, you can actually see that you're bleeding out information. So if you have remote desktop enabled on some of your externally facing systems, you can see the naming convention that was used on these. So this is really important to understand that even though you might try to do everything to protect your organization, some things might be seen from the outside. The other thing I wanted to mention was we had some vulnerability people on here. I wanted to show you that you can use our interface. So if you came into RiskIQ and we search for Jenkins, for example, I'm going to throw this in the chat real quick so that everyone will see it. So if I search for Jenkins, an article pops up. And if we take a look at this article, it talks about a CVE vulnerability. And if we open this up, we can actually see the reference to it. But what is Jenkins? If you're not familiar, Jenkins is an open source tool that developers use to create and test their software. And according to Google, there's over a million, there's an estimated million people out there. But if I look inside of RiskIQ and I look for Jenkins, okay, I can come into the community indicators and run a query and actually see exactly how many people have it. It's not an estimate. This is what we've seen out there. So 14,000 domains, but over 1,217,000 IP address have this Jenkins. And we actually have it down to the actual version numbers out there. We're able to really detect it down to that level. So as a vulnerability person, I can go out and see how this really affects the world and could potentially affect me. I'm going to run one more query real quick. I'm going to bring up another tool that we use internally. Hold on. I'm just making sure that I'm in the right
Hey, Benjamin?
workspace. Yes.
So another question came in. Can these sensors be tied into Elasticsearch for use with a SIEM?
So RiskIQ, all of our data is outside and it's in the SaaS instance, and we have the ability for APIs to pull data in. So we have a lot of our integrations already with different types of SIEMs out there that take our data and enhance it. So for example, we have one with ProtectWise, we have it with CrowdStrike, with Splunk, many different other ones out there where the data will automatically flow into those systems from RiskIQ. So we already have those. So let me finish this and then I'll go back and answer that question real quick. So if I go back to the RiskIQ Jenkins visibility here, I can also, if I have our global inventory digital footprint product, I can look at my own attack surface and see exactly where I have Jenkins in my own environment instantly. So when these 0-day vulnerabilities come out or something, I'm able to immediately look at the inventory of what's out there. And I have 205 different ones. So if I select it, it will give me the inventory of what's out there. I can see what versions of Jenkins are in there. I can see who's responsible for it, whether it's my own infrastructure or a partner I'm relying upon. I have all that information in here, and I can have this available, and it can go into ServiceNow. It can go into different places to give you that visibility. So for the vulnerability people, I wanted to show you that we have you covered as well inside the system from the global view and the local view. Did your thing come back?
Yeah. Yeah,
okay. Let me make you presenter real quick, and you can show that. Make presenter.
So this triggered IOC is similar to the last one, where I just browsed, directly to that known bad site. Obviously, if it involved some other activity, there may have already been a detection that was tied into that based on bad behavior, a bad file, something like that came from the domain. So this being all by itself means that it was just triggered entirely off that custom IOC. But I can look and scroll down and see those DNS requests and find, okay, Chrome reached out to the QuickBooks.com email or domain, which was associated with that project that we had before. So, going back and seeing the bigger picture as I step kind of outside of my own set of devices and look across the web and finding those other domains, I was able to, through that project with Benjamin, get that additional intelligence that wasn't tied in directly to what CrowdStrike researched or what we're picking up based on bad behavior, because in this case it was just a visit to a website, right, that was also involved with bad activity in the past. So all that stuff too, I wanted to add on the comments of the sensors, just in case that also involves the CrowdStrike data and those things that are occurring. We do have multiple ways to get our data into other platforms. So if you wanted to show in like a search or a SIM or something like that, you can use things like our SIM connector, or we have what we call Falcon Data Replicator, which allows you to get all that event data and archive it over time, along with all the APIs and that sort of thing. So those modules that we've been talking about involve all that API communication, which means that if you want to do something with data that's in CrowdStrike or in RiskIQ and you like PowerShell, odds are you probably got all the tools you need to get that data and throw together an integration on the fly, kind of like I did for the artifact scripts for the projects and articles.
Cool.
Okay.
So Brendan, I have a slide that I'm going to show to answer the question that came up. So let me just bring up on my side. So the traditional data sets, so you can see up here, all the ones that have trial next to it are the enterprise data sets that require a license to see. The WHOIS data and certificate data is filtered by the type of account you have. A free email account like a Yahoo or a Gmail, you're only going to see 14 days. If you use a corporate email, you'll see 90 days. If you have an enterprise, you'll see everything. You'll see the entire history going back as long as 10 years. And then inside of the threat portal that we were searching in with the new interface, you get enterprise indicators if you are a paid customer. If not, you get the community indicators that you can click on immediately, so you don't have to type those in. So that still saves you time. But if you have the enterprise indicators because you have a paid license, it will help you jumpstart your investigation because they've already linked that infrastructure together for you. So this is the breakdown of the different accounts. So you get 14-day history in the free email. If you create one with an enterprise email address, you'll get 90-day history. Barrett, any other questions?
Yeah, Benjamin, I think we have time for one more question as we're almost at the top of the hour here. People have been asking about the CrowdStrike integration and how they get it, how to enable it, and do they have to pay for it?
Yeah, so going through the CrowdStrike store, we'll get that turned on for you. You can just go into your Falcon up on the top left of the menu, and you should see the CrowdStrike store and all apps. And clicking that will take you to the partner integrations page, and you'll see the RiskIQ Illuminate app there. So as Ben mentioned, if you have an account already, you can associate with that. If you don't, then it can create it and create that organization, and then you can invite additional members in there. And then there are some differences, obviously, with the amount of data and how far that spans.
So by default, you'll be put into a 30-day trial, and then after the 30-day trial, some of the data sets won't be available to you.
Got it. Thanks, guys. And now we're right at the top of the hour, so that's all the time we'll have questions for today. We'll follow up directly with those who asked questions we weren't able to get to live. you see here on Benjamin's slide, you can always reach out to success@riskiq.net with any additional questions. Thank you to Benjamin and Brendan for a great workshop, and thank you all for attending, and we appreciate the time. And everyone have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.